It started in an attic, dim and eerie, with visibility limited to just 2 feet ahead. I had no idea why I was there. All I knew was that I woke up with no memory of how I got into that room. The most unsettling part was that my house didn't even have an attic, meaning I was in a stranger's home. The thick silence was almost suffocating, amplifying every small movement I made throughout the room. I recall observing my surroundings, or at least what I could discern nearby, until an unexpected sound broke the silence. Footsteps. It seemed like someone was trying their best to remain unheard, but the eerie creaking of the wooden floors further ahead was impossible to miss, echoing through the shadows and scattered objects in the room. I quickly slid myself backward, attempting to hide as I sat helplessly on the hard ground, trying to evade whatever was creeping ever closer. Initially, I wasn't too scared, but as the mysterious figure drew nearer, I heard a faint, unsettling laughter from the darkness. At that moment, my stomach dropped and my chest tightened with fear. Something's after me, I realized, and it somehow knows exactly where I am. I vaguely remember picking myself up as slowly as possible, trying not to alert whoever or whatever was there that I had realized my situation. I quickly scanned the area for an escape route, but found none. The darkness seemed to grow increasingly oppressive, as if it was engulfing me entirely. Desperately, I started feeling around for something to guide me away from the presence. My hand brushed against a box to my right. That was enough for me. I began cautiously walking in that direction. All the while, the laughter, now with a sinister tone, began echoing directly behind me. I swiftly turned around, ready to confront my predator, but as soon as I did, I was met with nothing but the enveloping obsidian darkness once again. I resumed my journey, only to notice something crawling low to the ground, moving towards me without looking up. I panicked, as anyone with their sanity intact would, and fell back onto the hard wooden floor. I remember scooting backward violently, sick with fear that churned in my gut, until this thing was directly in front of me, at my feet. It was a shadow-like figure, maintaining its form throughout my time in the attic. Though its movements were subtle, I could see it twitching unnaturally on the floor. The creature, now at my feet, had long limbs that stretched across the floor and vanished into the darkness, its body bony and grotesque. I was paralyzed with terror, unable to move as it climbed onto me, its cold, disgusting hands pressing heavily against my skin. In that moment, I snapped out of fear's grip, realizing I needed to escape. I began thrashing violently to shake off the creature, avoiding looking directly at it and instead staring past it. It roughly pinned me to the floor by my shoulders, seemingly unfazed by my struggle. When I finally looked at my disfigured captor, the first thing I saw was its disturbingly low-hanging, unhinged jaw. Its chipped, jagged teeth, reminiscent of a shark's multiple rows, sent a shiver down my spine. As I continued to struggle, it lowered its head so close to mine that I could feel its breath on my face. All of a sudden, a sharp pain shot through my shoulder. I cried out, glancing over to see my skin being ripped from my body and devoured by the creature. Sobbing, I watched as the remnants of my skin, still partially attached, disappeared into its mouth, and with drops of blood staining the floor beneath me. Panic overtook me, and I began screaming, "Get off me! Get off me!" louder and louder. It chewed my flesh like bubblegum, inspecting me from head to toe. When I looked up again, I found its face inches from mine, wearing a grim smile that sickened me, a smile I still see every day. As it chewed and stared at me with that horrible grin, It suddenly lifted its claws and slammed my face against the wooden floor with a loud crack. My vision blurred, and I felt groggy as it clutched my face, its massive hand dwarfing my features. I remember the sharp talons lodging deep into my head, one finger gouging into my eye. I screeched in agony as warm liquid trickled down my cheek, quickly filling my eye socket. The laughter returned, but now it was crazed. As I lay there, pinned to the ground, nausea washed over me and I started slipping into a near-paralyzed state. I couldn't move, my breathing grew shallow and sweat poured from me. I felt myself drifting in and out of consciousness, the obscene laughter of the monster above echoing in my ears. The pain became unbearable, and I gasped for air as the creature gripped my arms. Confused, I wondered why it would shift its focus when I was already losing consciousness. Then, I heard the sickening sound of bones being forcefully ripped from my body. The pain shot from my arm to my brain, wrapping my head in a blanket of agony. I screamed until my voice gave out, my throat burning and head pounding, as the sound of the creature crunching on my bones grew louder. From that point on, I drifted in and out of consciousness, only recalling the sensation of being torn limb from limb. I was overwhelmed by the feeling of my blood, now cooling to match the freezing surroundings. I lay there, lifeless, in the attic, incapable of movement. My vision deteriorated until everything went black, and my breathing ceased entirely. I no longer moved, not even an inch, as death finally took hold of me, offering a morbid sense of companionship. As I stirred awake, I gasped for air, feeling the clammy sweat on my skin and bed. Hastily, I pushed aside my blankets and sat on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down my face as I cradled my head in my hands. Breathing heavily, I rose and hurried to the nearby bathroom. Switching on the light, I confronted a horrifying reflection in the mirror. My left eye appeared as a raw, blackish red void, surrounded by dried blood on my face. In a panic, I tore off my shirt, revealing a bone where flesh should have been, along with deep scratch-like wounds on my back. The nausea overwhelmed me, and I vomited at the unsettling realization. Could it have all been real? In the morning hours, I reached out to the authorities, prompting them to conduct 2 thorough searches of my residence in pursuit of any traces of an intruder. Regrettably, they found nothing during my absence for a medical appointment. My doctor's examination yielded no definitive answers, merely suggesting that the injuries were likely self-inflicted. However, when I pressed him on how I could have possibly inflicted such extensive scratches on my back, he remained unable to provide a satisfactory response. This lingering question continues to perplex me. Fran Laurent possessed a natural curiosity. While excelling academically and displaying kindness and a gentle demeanor, she found herself somewhat isolated from her peers. Her solace lay in crafting miniature abodes from sticks and leaves near the school fence, a pastime she relished. Solitude held no fear for her unwavering companion, Mr. Midnight awaited her eagerly at home. "Good morning, Mr." Midnight she greeted her feline friend on a chilly Monday morning. "Hello, my dear Fran. Did you have a good night's rest, Mr.?" Midnight responded, stretching luxuriously. His sleek, ebony coat gleamed under the ambient light, resembling a polished piece of obsidian. "Yes, I did. Though I wish I could stay home today," Fran expressed her longing, reaching out to her beloved companion, gathering him tenderly in her arms as she prepared to begin the day. "I wish that every day. What prevents you from staying? Why must that large rolling container take you away each morning, Mr.?" Midnight inquired of Fran. I have to go to school, my dear kitty. Mother and father worked tirelessly for me to be responsible. Besides, they promised me a new drawing pad for my 11th birthday if I perform exceptionally well this semester. Fran explained with enthusiasm, adjusting her pale yellow stockings. Well, I must be off now. I love you. I'll see you very soon when I return from school. Fran shut the front door firmly behind her, settling onto her usual spot on the bench, her book bag tightly gripped. She silently hoped the bus would arrive soon, rescuing her from the chill. The previous night, Fran had been plagued by a peculiar dream. She hesitated to share it with Mr. Midnight, fearing it would only cause unnecessary concern, but it lingered in her mind, unsettling her. The visage she had encountered in her dream felt unnervingly real, a face stripped of flesh, its empty eye sockets peering into her room. Its skull bore long, twisted horns, reminiscent of some primal beast. Upon waking, Fran hurriedly drew the apparition, intending to banish its image from her memory. School passed in a blur of routine. Though she appreciated her studies, she longed to be home with her beloved cat. She couldn't shake the fear that the monstrous presence might return, threatening her feline companion. So upon returning to her bench, she sprinted up the stairs and burst through the door, eager to protect her home. Mr. Midnight Fran's voice echoed through the house. I've returned. She meticulously checked every corner, seeking her beloved feline companion. Eventually, she discovered him nestled in his favorite spot in the bathroom, where the vent emitted a comforting warmth. Fran. You're back, he greeted with a lazy yawn, roused from his tranquil slumber. I'm heading to my room to wrap up my homework. Want to join? Fran crouched down, offering her arms for him to snuggle into. He nodded, drowsy, and let Fran lift him up. Fran and Mr. Midnight settled in at her desk for the rest of the evening. She sat cross-legged, creating a cozy spot in her lap for her feline friend to curl up in. Fran wrapped up by neatly organizing her papers, all set to slip into her bag come morning. Mom and Dad won't be back for another hour. Want to doodle? Fran rose from her seat as Mr. Midnight hopped down. I'm not sure I can grip a pencil, but I'll give it a shot, Mr. Midnight quipped, showing off a paw with its delicate pink pads and tiny claws. Fran grinned, spreading her art supplies on the floor by her bed. She already had an idea in mind. With her navy blue crayon, Fran sketched out her window, the drapes, and the mysterious silhouette of a face. What's that, Mr. Midnight inquired, eyeing the completed drawing. In the bottom left corner, she had scribbled, I despise the creature. In the bottom left corner, she etched, I despise the creature, only a dream, Fran murmured in response. Exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed her, prompting Fran to unintentionally rest her cheek on the chilly hardwood floor, drifting into slumber. A loud, jarring noise jolted her from sleep. Glancing at the wall clock, she saw it was 1. Mom, Fran mumbled, rubbing her eyes, bewildered by her sudden awakening. She hadn't realized she'd dozed off. Still clad in her school attire, she felt stiffness from lying on the floor. No response greeted her as she approached the darkened house. Another sensation pricked her senses, a scent. Quietly, Fran turned the doorknob and slipped into the hallway. A faint aroma of rust and salt lingered, reminiscent of the metal coin in her coat pocket. It made her head spin. With trepidation, she pushed open the door to her parents' bedroom. It took a moment for Fran to grasp the reality of what lay before her. Initially, her mind insisted it must be another nightmare. On the floor rested what remained of her parents, their bodies divided with surgical precision akin to vegetables for a soup. Discarded in a corner, a kitchen knife bore witness to the gruesome scene. Her mother's limbs lay scattered, while her father's torso still seeped blood onto the floor. Amidst the crimson pool, Fran collapsed, tears streaming silently down her face. The cacophony in her mind had dulled to a pained whimper. Unmindful of the blood staining her clothes and skin, all she could fixate on were the fragments that had once been her parents. Only an hour prior, screams had pierced the air, yet how had she not stirred? The wail of approaching sirens heralded the arrival of police cars, but Fran remained deaf to their sound. The front door stood unlocked, and as the men in blue uniforms entered her parents' room, they discovered a young girl cowering against the farthest wall. Her yellow stockings now tainted crimson, arms clasped tightly around trembling knees. In her small, pale fingers she held a bloodied knife. "Dear God," murmured one of the men. Another, a woman dressed similarly, entered the room, eyeing the scene with a mixture of concern and disgust. Approaching the girl, the woman knelt down, speaking to her in a gentle, measured tone. "What's your name, Fran Laurent?" Fran murmured, her voice hoarse from tears. "Fran, you need to come with us," the woman said firmly, clutching Fran's wrist and coaxing her upright. Fran felt disoriented, almost numb. As the woman guided her towards the exit, Fran's resistance surged. "No, I can't go," she protested, shaking her head, attempting to wriggle free from the woman's grasp. "Mr. Midnight," with a sudden burst of determination, she broke away, darting towards the sanctuary of her bedroom. Amidst the chaotic noise of officers, Fran searched frantically for her beloved cat, calling out his name and scouring every possible hiding spot before the officers could intercept her again. "Stop. Let go. I won't leave my cat," Fran shrieked as the two men grabbed her arms, dragging her forcefully towards the front door. A sharp prick in her neck sent a heavy, drowsy sensation coursing through her veins, like molten lead filling her body. She fought to stay awake, experiencing a surreal detachment, as if observing herself from a distance. Behind the men and herself loomed the monstrous figure from her nightmares, towering and deformed, its grin sending shivers down her spine. A sharp sting pierced her neck, spreading a dense, lethargic sensation throughout her body, akin to molten lead coursing through her veins. Fighting to remain conscious, she experienced a surreal detachment, as if viewing herself from an outside perspective. Behind the two men and her own form stood the monstrous figure from her nightmares. Tall and grotesque, it grinned sinisterly. Upon awakening, anger surged within her. The monster had taken her parents from her, fueling her hatred towards it. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that it would return to claim her life as well. Fran scanned her environment, seeking a means of protection, yet all she encountered were sterile, empty white surfaces. Attempting to shield her eyes from the glaring artificial illumination, she found her arms immobile, bound by buckles restraining them tightly across her torso. Suddenly, a portion of the blank, padded wall slid open, revealing a doorway. Stepping through was a woman clad in white garments, her hands trembling as she carried a gleaming silver tray. "Fran," the nurse said, holding out a glass jar filled with red capsules. "The doctor recommended this for your hallucinations. It will assist you." Fran shook her head firmly. "No, I can't take that. I have to get back to Mr. Midnight." The nurse offered a sorrowful smile. "This is always the hardest," she murmured quietly to herself. "Dear Fran, there was never a cat. Mr. Midnight isn't real." Fran shook her head, avoiding the nurse's gaze. "Please, Fran, be cooperative and take your medication," urged the nurse gently. Late into the night, I found myself navigating the familiar route back home from my recently acquired job. While the compensation left much to be desired and the commute was lengthy, my circumstances left me with little alternative, especially given my overdue rent. Fatigued from a lengthy inaugural day at work, my sole desire was to reach home and collapse into slumber. While confident in my familiarity with the route, I had initially arrived in daylight, rendering navigation simpler amidst the new surroundings. However, as night fell, I realized the scarcity of streetlights, a detail overlooked in the brightness of afternoon. Compounded by the falling snow, my sense of direction faltered. Somewhere amidst the journey, I must have veered off course, finding myself utterly disoriented. Navigating through unknown streets with no clear direction, I eventually reached a traffic signal, a welcome sight indicating proximity to the highway. Though confident the route lay to the right, my progress was impeded by a glaring red light and a prominent sign declaring no right turn on red. Despite the authoritative message conveyed in capital letters, the late hour and deserted surroundings prompted me to question the necessity of adhering strictly to the rule. "Enough of this," I muttered, pressing down on the accelerator. Just as I maneuvered through the turn, a sudden movement caught me off guard. A heavy, ominous thud reverberated within the car, jolting me into immediate action. Without hesitation, I jammed my foot onto the brake pedal. Initially frozen in shock, I shut off the engine, silently praying that the collision had involved nothing more than a passing animal. After the initial shock subsided, optimism morphed into expectation. Stepping out of the car, I clasped my fingers together and held my breath. As I approached the front of the vehicle, the sight of a child's legs met my eyes. My heart plummeted, and a wave of sickness and shame washed over me, forcing me to my knees. I rose, though my posture was far from erect, and approached the child. She appeared to be a girl of about 8 years old, with a small blue backpack beside her. A sleeping bag lay nearby, unfurled. She lay prone, her blonde hair matted with crimson blood. Delicate snowflakes drifted down onto her motionless form. In the glow of the headlights, she seemed akin to a fallen angel. It was as if I was being subjected to a poignant lesson, one delivered with unforgiving severity. I retreated to the car and punched in 911. While waiting for assistance, I replayed the incident in my mind. Despite it being a minor transgression, I couldn't bring myself to admit to making an illegal right turn, especially given the tragic outcome. To everyone else, the traffic light had been green. The police and an ambulance pulled up, and I hurried over to meet them. But when I attempted to point out the girl, she was nowhere to be found. There was no trace of blood on the ground, nor any footprint in the snow. "So, you're saying you collided with someone, and they were standing right here?" "Yes, I swear I saw her. It was a young girl. I swear on everything I couldn't fathom where she had vanished to, or why there was no sign of an accident." I must have sounded utterly bewildered. "Well, it seems like she must have taken off. Did you confirm whether she was breathing?" I didn't. I mean, I noticed the blood and she wasn't stirring. I was just stunned," I stammered, feeling utterly foolish. It was clear I should have checked, but I was too preoccupied with how to protect myself. Embarrassing hardly captured the magnitude of my mistake. "You were moving quite slowly. It's likely she's just startled. We'll comb through the vicinity. She can't have gone too far. Just stay put, and we'll locate her." Quietly, I remained seated as they meticulously searched for the young girl. Deep down, I sensed they wouldn't uncover her. There were no traces to follow. Weariness weighed on my eyelids, and whenever I teetered on the edge of sleep, haunting images of the girl's form flickered in my mind. In each fleeting vision, her gaze pierced mine, brimming with a blend of sadness and fury. As I drifted into sleep's embrace, a knock interrupted the quiet against my car window. Despite their thorough search, there was no trace of the girl, but they promised to update me if anything emerged. It brought a measure of relief, tinged with dissatisfaction. On the journey back, I adhered strictly to the speed limit, halting at every green light. Sleep eluded me that night, leaving me restless and weary. The following day, I wasn't exactly enthusiastic about heading to the office, but being a fresh recruit, I didn't have much of a say. Ironically, I found myself lost on the journey back. Yet again. My intention was to have some reverse directions printed out, but I was too consumed by the events of the prior night. Once more, I found myself navigating through unfamiliar territory until I reached a halt at a red light. I pondered, is this the identical intersection I mused internally? Though uncertain at that moment, the familiar sight of the no right turn on red sign affirmed some consistency. My earlier deduction regarding the highway's location on the right reinforced the necessity of making the turn. Yet this time, I resolved to wait until the signal shifted before proceeding. The duration eluded me, but it seemed to stretch to at least 20 minutes. With my phone's clock frozen at 12:47, time became an enigma. Entranced by the unyielding proclamation of no right turn on red, I found myself lost in contemplation, questioning their significance in this ordeal. As the light remained steadfast, my patience dwindled with each passing moment. "I can't believe this," I exclaimed in protest. It was a decision I hesitated to make, yet options seemed scarce. Proceeding cautiously, I turned with painstaking slowness, scanning my surroundings for any sign of presence. Convinced of the road's emptiness, much like the previous night, a sudden figure darted into view, startlingly close to the car. "Damn it," I yelled, slamming my foot on the brakes. "This isn't happening." I leaped out of the car and hurried to examine the figure. Shock enveloped me as I recognized her. It was the same girl. The familiar little blue backpack rested beside her, while her blonde hair was matted with dark crimson blood. The sight left me speechless, my mind reeling in disbelief. Whether reality or illusion, the scene was even more chilling the second time around. I returned to my car, hesitant to call the police. Then I recalled the officer's words about confirming her death. IW. My third day at work was unbearable. I couldn't focus given the circumstances, and I knew no one would understand or sympathize. Various scenarios kept running through my mind. I imagined a little girl at a slumber party, enjoying herself until her friends played a cruel prank. She calls her mother in tears, but her mother, too tired to pick her up, tells her to walk home. On her way back, I hit her with my car. This scenario seemed the most plausible. I also began to think she might be a ghost who had already been struck by another car in a hit and run, now seeking someone to uncover the truth about her death. But why choose me? When my shift ended, I hesitated to leave. After a few drives to work, I had finally memorized the route home, but that intersection still terrified me. That sign haunted my thoughts. I drove cautiously, alert and vigilant, and eventually merged onto the highway, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. Smiling, I turned up the radio and sped past the limit, enjoying the newfound freedom. It felt like it was taking forever to reach my exit, but I was too exhausted to find it suspicious. My eyelids grew heavy, and I nearly drifted off. During a prolonged blink, I found myself somewhere completely different. The highway had vanished, replaced by an intersection with a red light. A sign at the corner stood firm, "No right turn on red." "What the?" I muttered, looking around in disbelief. It was the same intersection. How I ended up there was beyond comprehension. Was some otherworldly force trying to send me a message? Was it my destiny to help this little girl? All I wanted was to go home. This time I resolved to wait until the light turned green, even if it took all night. I felt like I had been sitting there for hours, but my phone was frozen at 12:47 again. Maybe that was when the little girl died. The light remained red, and I knew it would never change. Something was reaching out to me for help, but I didn't care. All I wanted was to go home. I yelled at the traffic light, "Change already, asshole," as if it would respond to my frustration. My irritation grew, and I found myself slipping into a delusional state where the idea of killing the little girl a third time almost seemed appealing. But then I remembered the guilt I felt each time. Even though I knew she wasn't real, the experience felt painfully genuine. I shook off the thought and gripped the steering wheel firmly. I couldn't stay there forever. There was only one thing left to do. "Screw it," I muttered, and made a left turn.